Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei and I'm so excited to paint with you today. Today we're going to be doing another page in our watercolor journals, and we're going to take a little bit of a break. If you've been following along with the last few videos, we are going to take a break from the Christmas holiday illustrations that I've been doing and go more landscape. So today we're going to do a landscape. Wintry themed, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're new here, we paint in our watercolor journals as often as we can. We try not to have be too hard on ourselves and learn to play, have fun, experiment in our journals. We are using, or I am using, a 6x9 Bao watercolor journal. This is 140-pound cold press paper, so that's weight and texture, and it's 100% cotton. I also have my Core Paints QOR by Golden. This is my 24 paint set, and I'm actually going to be introducing a color that is not in this 24 paint set. So hang on tight for that. But whatever color or whatever brand you like to use will be perfectly fine. We do not have to be identical. But if you want to learn more about my supplies and materials, go ahead and check out the description of the video to links to everything I use in this video, but also to things I use in other videos. Last but not least, I have my brushes. I have a set of 3 here today, a 10, a 6, and a 4. These are all round brushes. These happen to be Velvet Touch by Princeton. But again, whatever brushes you have will work great. I'm sure of it. I'm also using some tape. So you can see I've taped out, and it's hard to see because I used a light color tape instead of colored. I've taped out my sketchbook. So I did all around the edges and I did one long strip in the middle. And our landscape today is going to be a little more unusual, and it's going to be a long panoramic. So I'm going to do the top section here, and then we'll do a separate one in the bottom section down here, probably at another time, because I think this will take up plenty of time. But if we have time, we'll do 2 today. Don't you love how I plan these out so methodically? No, because we're in our watercolor journals and we want to be a little spontaneous and kind of go with the flow. Okay, so I want to do a winter night sky. And I've done things like this similarly before, haven't done one in a long time. And I think I'm going to put a little structure in it, and like a little house or cabin, and a snowy ground, and then also with the little cabin, I'm going to do a little smoke coming out of it, because someone asked me a couple videos back, or maybe more than a couple, but how to get smoke coming out of a chimney. And there's 2 ways I can recommend on a dark night sky. So I do have a pencil. This is an 8H, so that's just the hardness. It's very hard, so it's going to draw very lightly. And actually that might not be good for you guys because you won't be able to see what I'm doing. But I recommend 8 or a 6H for sketching, because it's a very light line and you don't have to worry about being too heavy-handed. So I'm going to keep my horizon line really low, and I'm going to make it kind of bumpy and hilly. And we'll paint more of this in for kind of little snow drifts. And then we're going to put a little structure, like I said. I'm going to put it off to the side here. I'm going to put a point up here and just do a triangle-ish shape this way. I am going to have it receding into the background a little bit. So this is the front. Okay, so we have like just a tiny little house barn-ish thing. We're going to give it a chimney. This is actually a little taller than I want. I want it to be a little more squat. So what I'm going to do, instead of erasing the whole thing and bringing it down, where are my kneaded erasers? I'm actually going to bring the horizon line, or the snowdrift, up to it, because that will just be easier. So it's like sitting on a little hill there, okay? And then we'll give it a little chimney over to the side. And we're going to keep this kind of loose when we paint it in. I don't need it to be super structured. And of course it's going to need a door somewhere in here. It is big enough to be 2 stories, so we'll put a little window up here and a couple of windows over here. Perfect. So cute little house. You can add things like a little fence around it. I'm going to add some trees, I think, over here in this section, just kind of framing it out. Some evergreen trees. Okay, so there's our little house on the hill. The kind of, other than this little structure, the focal point of this is going to be this beautiful night sky. So we're going to start on that first because it's going to take at least 2 layers. All right, so colors. I'm going to introduce indigo. Core has a beautiful indigo color, which is a dark navy blue. You can get a similar color if you don't have indigo in your palette by using phthalo blue and a Payne's gray, or phthalo blue and a black. Of course, they're going to separate a little bit. When you mix colors together, it's not going to be exact, but it'll be a pretty nice kind of knockoff of it. So here is my indigo. I put a little blob in here. So that's indigo, and I'll show you phthalo blue. And I just put fresh phthalo in my palette. So it's still wet. It's not dried out yet. And Payne's gray. And the phthalo blue and Payne's gray is going to have definitely a cooler, or like a greener tint to it. Not green, but just a greener tint. Here, let me see if I can pull out. So this is the indigo, or I'm sorry, this is the phthalo blue and Payne's gray combination. And let me just grade it out there. And then this is indigo straight from the tube. So there you go. You can see that they're similar. This one has a little bit of a redder, I know it doesn't look red, but, and I don't want to confuse you, but it has a warmer kind of slightly grayer tint to it. Than the phthalo. The phthalo, you really get some of that blue-green feel to it. So just, but still lovely. You could add more Payne's gray, certainly. And maybe if you used like a lamp black, it would get a little bit closer. All right, we won't spend too much time on color mixing. I have many ideas of what else you could do to get it closer, but we won't do that. Okay, so we're going to use our indigo, or if you want to use a combination of the phthalo and Payne's gray, go ahead and do that. And I'm also going to pull out purple, Dioxazine purple over here. I'm not going to worry if they mix in my palette because I'm going to mix them all in the sky anyway. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do, if you feel like you need to mask this little house out, you can, because we're just going to paint, I'm going to paint around it, but one of the tricks, I'm going to do wet on wet, and one of the tricks I guess I have, it's not really a trick, but when trying to mask around a particular object and you're doing wet on wet, so I'm going to do this wet on wet sky, so I'm just going to put my water all around this object, and when I start to paint wet on wet, the paint is going to stay in only the wet areas, so it's going to make it a little easier when you get up close to the edge of the house. Like, you have to be careful with your water so that it's not getting inside that outline, but it's much easier just to control like water or very diluted light paint than it is a really wet brush with lots of paint on it. Because my paper is 100% cotton, it absorbs this water really nicely, so I might have to add a little bit more than you would if you're using a wood pulp paper. And you can see my water has a little tint to it because I mixed all that phthalo and indigo in there, rinsed my brush out, and that's fine for me, but it's nice that you can actually see it. All right, so now I'm just going to start to drop in a bunch of this indigo and purple. You could decide like certain areas you want lighter, more white, and others darker if you wanted vignette the edges. So see how that is much easier. I can just kind of put paint near the edge and it will bleed right up next to the edge of the house, but I don't have to worry about like outlining it again with the paint. Drop a little purple in here. Don't worry, we'll get to the chimney in a minute. And then I can also just have a wet brush and drop in water. I do want this to be darker, like on the edges and in the corners. So you're going to let this dry. The thing with these darker colors, they look super dark when they're wet, and then they do lighten quite a bit as they dry. So just keep that in mind. Go super, super dark. Just knowing in the areas you really want dark, just knowing it is going to get lighter. All right, so for the chimney, 2 ways that you could do this. I'm going to do it this first way, and then maybe we'll demo the second way. I'm just going to pull color out. So I'm going to go back in here with my brush. I'm going to use a smaller one since this is a small chimney. Get my brush damp. Sorry, there's like green left in this brush. I don't want to introduce any green, that's for sure. So just a damp brush and pull out color. You can do it with a brush. You could do it with a piece of tissue paper or kitchen paper or paper towel, whatever you call it where you are. So you can do it like that, and you can see I try to keep it not too, this is really a tiny space, but not too blocky. And if you want to add some color just around the edges, just so it doesn't look too blocky. Like when I pulled it out, it all seemed like one stiff column, and I don't want that. There we go. And you want the edges to be soft. And then the other way that you can do it is, I'm going to introduce some white watercolor. So a lot of times we don't use white. And this won't work unless your background is pretty dark. But the white watercolor, because we don't want it to stay white, we want it to almost be gray, which is exactly what will happen. You can add white watercolor. So it looks super white right now. It will not stay that way. As it dries, I'm going to soften the edges. Just a damp brush. But as it dries, it's going to get lighter and lighter. That's another way that you could do that, knowing that it's going to, let me show you. Let me show you. I'm going to make it dry. So look, as I dry it, and it's not even fully dry yet, it's getting lighter and lighter because it is transparent, and it is basically blending in with the background. So you could add a couple layers of it to help with the transparency, but it's never going to stay like white, which you don't want it to if it's smoke coming out of a chimney. Okay, so let's leave that to dry on its own. The rest of this is almost dry. It looks super fun. So let's do our snow. So the snow, we're just going to take this purpley blue indigo color here. This works just fine. And I'm going to add lots of water to it. I want it to be really light because our snow is white, but it's going to have some shadows on it. And I didn't put a moon or anything in here, so there's no particular directional light, but maybe in front of the house, there would be a bit of a shadow, and then we're going to create just a few kind of swooping snow mounds and shadows. Just that little bit is enough to give a suggestion of texture. There we go. And we'll let all of this dry. While that's drying, I'm going to just pick out some colors for the house. So it's nighttime, it's dark, it's dusky. The colors are not going to be super bright. Even if it was a bright pink house, the colors would be subdued at this time of night in this light. So I think I'm going to paint. I'm trying to decide if I should leave it white and do the roof a color, the windows a color, and leave the house itself white. Let's start with that. And if I hate it, I can always paint it a color. All right, so we're going to leave the house white. I am going to first put some yellow. This is just Diarylide yellow. It's a very warm yellow inside the windows because there's going to be life inside the windows. The roof, let's go ahead and make that red. Why not? But it's going to be a very muted red. So I'm going to take red, I mixed it over here in some yellow, and I'm going to add a little green to it. You don't have to mix yours in yellow, but I want it to be, it's a much orangier, browner red. So it's red, but not quite too red. And I'm going to make the door red as well, I've decided. So, and my sky around this red is dry enough to do this. This actually has a little too much. I probably shouldn't have mixed it with the yellow because yellow is one of the first colors we really lose. It's okay though. And then I'm also going to bring it, a line of it down, a very thin line around this side to kind of bring the whole house together. The door we're going to make red as well. I'm going to bring in some more of this alizarin crimson. And it's far away and it's tiny. It doesn't have to be too detailed. You don't have to put in like all of the hardware and the handles and things like that. And then after that dries, we're going to get in there with, I have this, what we used for our snow, those shadows. I'm going to put some of that in here as well, but I really want those things to dry. So on the corner here, we're going to make one side of this white house darker and grayer. We're going to leave the other side whiter or fully white. And then even under this eave here, we're going to put a little shadow. I guess on the corner because I got some blue paint in there. So just putting in some shadows. There we go. I'm going to come back up here with this white watercolor. I'm going to paint another kind of layer of it for the smoke. And I never painted in the chimney. I'm going to just do that in this red. Red, green. So this dark brown color. I'm going to pick up a little blue. Just going to make it nice and dark. Slightly different color than the roof itself. But again, like I said, it's tiny, it's far away. You don't have to get too detailed with it. We can give it a little shadow. Okay. Let that dry. We'll put on some details either in ink or with our brush. We can put on window panes or window sills. I think these are dry. So just details in the window and a little outline around the window to give them a little more same up here. Again, you could do this in ink if you're nervous about your brush skills or you don't have a really great brush with a really well-defined tip on it. Okay, so let's put in, how are we doing on time here? I'm going to take this, oh, this isn't indigo. This is the phthalo blue. You could use indigo here if that's what you already have. I just happen to make up this indigo. I'm sorry. I just happen to already have some of this phthalo Payne's gray combination, so I'm just going to use it. I'm going to use it for trees. So I'm going to put some trees here. Some just big, sparse little pines. And we are going to put snow. We're going to make this beautiful kind of night sky. Make it snowing. We're going to do that with bleed proof white. And we can come back in and put some of that on the trees as well. Let's do another two smaller ones over here. And there's lots of different ways you can do your trees, lots of different shapes you can. So like if I wanted to do this one, but I wanted it to be the boughs going up, it to be wider and rounder at the bottom. There we go. So we have some little trees there. We'll do a little fence. There we go. Okay. So last but not least, I think we just have to add some snow. And we're going to do that with our Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. If you don't have this, you could use, if you have a white acrylic paint or gouache, white gouache, you could use that. The white watercolor really won't work for this. You saw how many times we had to put a thick layer, a thick layer on here, and it's barely white, gray. And if you really want this to pop, you do need to use an opaque type of paint. So this is not watercolor. This will now be a mixed media piece, but that's okay. I'm going to take some of this out, and I am going to water it down a little. It's water-based. It's going to dry matte just like watercolor, but it is going to be more opaque. And then I am going to, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can splatter with a brush. Hold on, please. I'm just going to, here, I'm going to take my sample card here. I'm just going to cover up down here so I don't get it on the other parts. So you can take a brush and splatter it like this. So just fully load it nice and wet, and just sprinkle. You are going to get bigger, what I would say, snowflakes, little snowballs in there. You want them to be not perfect and erratic. Another tool you can employ is a toothbrush. Load up the bristles like this. This is going to give you much tinier splotches. I kind of like the combination of the two. This brush I probably should have wet a little bit first. So putting in, and they're much smaller. This I tend to like to do for like a star field versus snow. And you could also take, like if you have a scruffier, more of an acrylic type brush. I'm going to use this. This is a Deerfoot brush. Oh, this is a watercolor brush, but it's meant for making like more textured things. But something with, and you could take it and use these bristles to flick. Oh, this actually brush isn't working very well for this, and flick it on. But I would use more of a coarse, rough, something that you would use more for acrylic paint, maybe an older brush to do that. And then if you get any really big splotches on there that you really don't like, you can pick them up with like a paper towel. So like this one right here, I'm like out of paper towel in my vicinity. I would have to go get more. I'm using this very dirty one. I'm just gonna pick them up over those trees. I am gonna put a little bit more on here. My bleed proof white is in bad shape. I need to order more. I have just a little left, and I left the jar open by accident. There we go. There's a nice, more medium size. So we have some nice snow going on. And then we can also take this same thing on our trees. So I'm just using my tiny brush. If you wanted to add just some like globs of snow on the tops. Don't get too carried away, but on the tops of some of your trees, like the branches are holding a little bit of snow up there. You could even put a little bit like on the rooftop. The goal with bleed proof white is to not get carried away. It's hard to do. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to clean up a little bit and then we'll take off our tape and see what we have here. All right, we're back and I've cleaned my space up and we zoomed in a little bit so you can kind of see the final results here. I would recommend, if you're using bleed proof white and splattering snow, make sure the area around whatever you're splattering is free of things you don't want to get paint onto. And we're actually going to do another painting below this, so I'm only going to rip off the top tape and the sides. The bottom, there's not much of an edge there anyway because we're going into white snow, so I think you'll be okay. But there we have our beautiful little snowy night sky. I don't know what I'm going to paint down here, but we're going to do another landscape that'll give us a whole other look and feel. Maybe we'll do something at sunrise or sunset. But I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to check out the description for links to supplies and materials. You can also, if you're so inclined, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, share with a friend who might also enjoy this watercolor journey. Thanks y'all, happy painting, and I'll see you again soon.